today for our welcome everyone. Welcome to our workshop today for workshop number 8, our final in a series of 8 in a partnership with the Campaign for Grade Level Reading. And today's topic is what it means to drive systems change in digital access. We're bringing folks in right now, and we are very excited to get started. We're just going to keep letting some folks drop in, so please get ready for an action-packed workshop and a lot to share. We really look forward to you participating in the Q&A section, in the chat box, and in other areas. Welcome, everyone. Thank you for being here today. My name is Sherry Corrier, and I am the Digital Access for All Initiative Manager for the Patterson Foundation. We're really thrilled to have everyone here today, and as folks start to come in, we're going to go ahead and get started. We have an action-packed program today, and we'd like to welcome you again to what it means to drive systems change in digital access. We're going to move to our next slide, which helps us a lot with helping you set the stage for this particular session. We'd love for you to introduce yourself in the chat box, your name, your organization, your role. Go ahead and put that in there. Gives us an opportunity to know who's here and to be able to share with you in the future. Also, while you're on screen, please feel free to rename yourself on screen as well, so that later on, when we are participating in the Q&A, we can call upon you. Also, we'd like you all to mute yourselves right now. There'll be an opportunity later for folks to come on and for them to speak. And again, always using the chat box whenever you'd like to put anything in there. You'll see lots of messages from our team at the Digital Access for All Initiative and those of our presenters. Feel free to put any information. When we get to the Q&A, feel free to raise your hand digitally, of course, and we'll call upon you to participate. We do want you to know that we record the sessions. We record them and we do share those back out for folks that may not be able to stay for the full session. Also, again, in our breaks and when we're working with everyone in the Q&A, please share. And then we ask you to join us at our Twitter. That handle is here, hashtag digital access for all. Also hashtag GL reading, hashtag funder to funder. So stay tuned. Also, at the end of the program, we're going to talk briefly about our final report. Well, thank you so much. The Patterson Foundation is so pleased to have you all here. Our goal is to strengthen those around us and to strengthen the efforts of people, organizations, and communities in ways that foster wide participation. We're very excited to be in this final workshop series with one of our main partners and our co-host, and that's our Campaign for Grade Level Reading. And I'd like to introduce Sarah Torian, who will be coming on the screen. Sarah, thank you for being here.
Thank you. And I just wanted to join with Sherry in welcoming everyone for joining us today, and just say a huge thank you to our colleagues at the Patterson Foundation, Sherry and Michael, who have done such an incredible job of pulling together these sessions, these 8 sessions. It's been an honor and a delight to support them in spreading the word about these sessions because, you know, we've known it at the Campaign for Grade Level Reading. We've known the importance of ensuring digital equity and access long before the pandemic, but it has become so incredibly apparent that we cannot advance equitable learning recovery without it. And so these sessions have really helped to inform the work of the campaign, but also all of our partners in the network. So thank you so much and welcome everyone.
Thank you, Sarah. We love the partnership, and we have grown the success of the workshops with your partnership and people all across the country, and that's what's really exciting for everyone. So I get to have the honor now of introducing our presenters for today, and this is so exciting for me because we've already sent their bios, the full bios, to you all, and we'd love for you to read through those. We want to save most of the time today for the interaction, but today here with us. Super excited to have a partner with us that we've worked with all the way back since June of 2021, Kayla Hernandez Yola, for the Deputy Chief Consumer Affairs and Outreach Division with the Federal Communications Commission. She has a long title, and what it really means is that she does a lot for outreach and getting all the messages out. Also joining us today is Laura Roth as the Vice President of Programs for Archstone Foundation. And also Laura has a long bio with her background in gerontology and some of the other fantastic work that she's doing. And then also Wilma Norton, right here close by to us in Tampa, the Vice President of Community Connections and of the Community Foundation of Tampa Bay. So thank you so much for you being here. And next, I just want to introduce our facilitator, our very own Michael Zimmerman. Michael is our National Initiative Development Lead for the National Philanthropy Scan. And Michael, I'd love for you to share with the group and take over the facilitation today. It's been an honor working with you on the workshop series, and good luck today. Thank you.
Thank you, Sherry. Good morning, good afternoon. We're thrilled you're here. I'm Michael Zimmerman with the Patterson Foundation, and I have bittersweet news to share with everyone because this will be our final workshop of our series. This is our 8th workshop, and it's been quite a journey, an incredible journey. And along that journey, I feel I've been afforded the opportunity to get to know many of you on a personal level. I've been afforded an opportunity to get to know your work on a personal level and to really get a glimpse into understanding the nuances of the opportunities, the challenges, and the needs that are emerging and continuing to persist in each of your communities. And so I thank each of you for opening up, for connecting with us, and for sharing with us all of this information that helps us understand the landscape of digital access and the roles funders can play in addressing digital access needs. So this will be my last day with the Patterson Foundation. I will be moving to the Farish Foundation in Rochester, New York. So I look forward to continuing these relationships with many of you after my launch from here and my arrival there. So this started with a journey around, we wanted to know who was doing what, where, and how were they addressing digital access needs across the country. And so interviewing people at funders from the West Coast to the East Coast and all in between, we were able to discover a lot. We gathered our findings. We produced a National Philanthropy Scan report, which is called Society and Philanthropy in Action, New Realities in Digital Access, which will be dropped in the link in the chat. And that report showed prevailing themes that each of you expressed to us as you talked about your work. And so we were able to explore many of these prevailing themes over the course of 8 workshops. And that led us to this final workshop. And we're excited to explore this next theme with our panelists and with all of you. But we're going to continue this exploration because today we're thrilled to be kicking off our final workshop titled What It Means to Drive Systems Change in Digital Access. And we will take a deep dive into the work of the Archstone Foundation, the Community Foundation of Tampa Bay, and the Federal Communications Commission, FCC, around systems change, policy, and advocacy work in digital access. So joining me today is first Dr. Laura Rath. Laura is the Vice President of Programs with Archstone Foundation. Laura, good morning, and thank you for joining us from sunny California.
Well, thank you so much, and good morning. I want to say thanks for having Archstone Foundation on this wonderful panel. As a gerontologist, I'm so pleased that you've included the voice of older adults and their needs in this important conversation. So thank you.
Yeah, and thank you for the incredible work you do. And of course, that is an important voice as we think about all the populations and communities we can serve, particularly in digital access. And so on the heels of that, we know that Archstone Foundation's mission is to improve the health and well-being of older adults and their caregivers throughout California. And in recognizing that using technology better is key to bridging silos and achieving integrated health and social services at scale, could you share more about the Foundation's strategies and approaches to its work at the nexus of systems change and digital access? And can you also share how that plays out in promoting teams, enhancing training, and improving technology?
Yeah, thank you so much for that question. And that's just right. Our mission at Archstone is to improve the health and well-being of older Californians and their caregivers. And we think that could best be achieved by breaking down the silos that currently exist in care for older adults. And we really see those silos as creating barriers between the social support services that older adults need to live in their homes and communities where they want to remain, and the healthcare and support that they'll need as they age. And so for us, our vision really is one of integration, and that's integration between those sectors of healthcare and social services and supports. And really the way I think about it is, maybe I'll start with just a brief story of my mother-in-law, who in the last years of her life wanted to remain in her home where she had lived for 50 years, raised her 5 children. But as she was coming in and out of the hospital, it was hard to coordinate the additional support and services she needed. One example that comes to mind is for Meals on Wheels. And, we called, and here I'm someone who's worked in aging services for years. So I called our local Meals on Wheels, but it was months-long waiting list in order to receive those services. And we just think about that as an opportunity when older adults are maybe leaving the hospital, coming back home. How are the caregivers alerted? How will that family system know what additional supports are needed in order to provide the care that, that people want to remain safe and healthy in their own home? So we think technology provides one of those keys to providing that support and access. And just as you said, we approach this idea of integration through teams, training, and technology. And for us, technology is really about maybe not so much the hardware, but the software. Thinking about who needs the information, how can they get it, and how can technology provide the access and support to be able to do that.
Thank you, Laura. That is fantastic. And thank you for sharing a little more about how Archstone approaches this work and even a personal example. I actually would like to move over to Wilma as we think about what Laura just shared. First of all, Wilma, thank you for joining us.
Thanks for having us. We're nearby the Patterson Foundation and are big fans of the work that you do. So we're honored to be part of this today.
Thank you, Wilma. So Wilma, can you share more about how the Community Foundation of Tampa Bay's work has shifted and evolved through an advocacy lens and in terms of digital access and advocacy at large?
Sure. For many years, our community foundation, I think like many community foundations, really concentrated on the financial part of our work, the bringing in philanthropic dollars, working with fund holders, managing and growing those assets. And that's important work and a key of what we do. But over the last, probably 5 to 7 years, we have come to realize that the financial part of it isn't enough. And so we've begun to talk more about our social capital, our moral capital, our intellectual capital, our reputational capital, and how we can use financial resources, but also our partnerships, our voices, all of those assets to move change forward in the community. And I've been with the Community Foundation now 9 years. And I think when I came, there was a lot of talk about we are Switzerland, we are neutral, we don't take a stand. And I'm sure a lot of you have heard that in this kind of work, but it is an educational evolution to realize that if you're so neutral that you don't stand, if you stand for everything, you stand for nothing. And there are some things we can all agree on, and that is that education is the key to prosperity, and that opportunity is something that should be equitable for all people. And so digital inclusion is our most recent venture into this space. And it really is through that lens of digital access is important for mental and physical well-being. It's important for employment opportunities. It has become over the last decades really like a utility. And so we are bringing cross-sector folks together, as we do on other issues, to educate, to advocate, to do research, and to, we hope, bring our vision that of digital inclusion for all in our community as a way to a more prosperous community. And that's not lobbying, that's not any of those bad words. It really is advocacy in the true sense.
Yeah, thank you, Wilma. And I know, Wilma, we're going to have more questions about the advocacy lens and how it intersects with philanthropy
Yes.
Later on in the workshop. But we can certainly, there are many funders that are reluctant to touch this space, as to stay within legal, rights, and status. So thank you for sharing a little more about how the Community Foundation in Tampa Bay is immersed in the advocacy space. And we're going to move along to our third panelist, Kayla. Thank you so much for joining us. And good afternoon.
Well, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for having me here today. I look forward to sharing information, but also learning from all of you.
Absolutely, absolutely. And Kayla, one of the prevailing questions that we had was how the FCC is coordinating with partners on the Affordable Connectivity Program, ACP, and from your perspective, what an ideal collaboration of partners with the FCC looks like.
Well, thank you for that question. So I'll start with the very basic. If you're not aware already of the Affordable Connectivity Program, it provides a benefit of up to $30 per month off the household's internet bill, and for households on qualifying tribal lands, that benefit goes up to $75. So why would this be something that the FCC is talking about? It's because Congress gave us $14.2 billion for this program. Some of the ways that the FCC can help to share information in your communities includes, we do a lot of train the trainers. On the actual application, we walk communities, and please note that I refer to everyone as communities and as partners because that is the lexicon of the FCC. But we do that information. We share through presentations. We also ask that anyone who's interested in information from the FCC, you can join our contacts list. I believe my email address is already in the chat, but after this, if anyone's interested, and not only will you get information about ACP, but you also get invited to our monthly consumer calls, and those are very casual. We invite anyone who's interested in information about, right now it is the Affordable Connectivity Program, but other things that the FCC does. One of the things we also look at is sharing information. We have a wonderful outreach toolkit available online. The tools are available for free. A lot of people have asked if we charge for downloading the information. It's totally free to use. It's really great when you have events, and we try to make them as simple as possible, with understanding that most consumers don't have time to read something lengthy. So most of the materials are one-pagers that you can easily read yourself and share. It includes the basics of information. Right now, if you haven't heard of, the application is now available on getinternet.gov. That's an updated email address for this. And I'll talk about a lot of these things more later, but the important one, how do I see an ideal relationship? I think the ideal relationship with the FCC is reaching out to us whenever you need information. We have a lot of information available, and I could talk hours about all that we do, but really it is reaching out to us. If you have any questions, any doubts, anything that you might not be aware of that the FCC does, please contact us. Again, my email address is right there. We also support the work that everyone does. We understand that how hard it is to get some consumers enrolled in the Affordable Connectivity Program. So off the top, my appreciation for all the work that you will be doing to get consumers who are eligible for this, very much appreciated. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Kayla. I want to take a moment before we go to the next portion here. From our panelists, you've now each heard from each other. Was there anything else that you wanted to add or chime in on as you heard from each other about each other's work and how you're each thinking about systems change, advocacy, policy work, or in general, anything that struck you that you wanted to share?
I can jump in and just say, wow, 14.2 billion. What a great, what a great agency to partner with. You know, and we'll talk about that more, of course, when we get to more of the questions, but I think that's why partnership is key. You know, Archstone's just a small foundation out in California, but to be able, just as you said, to help spread the word about that program, make sure it gets to the people that we care about, for Archstone Foundation older adults, but across the lifespan, across different geographies, the different states. It's really terrific to hear about that program, and I look forward to learning more.
Thank you for that. And for me, I really want to learn about the communities that are served by my fellow presenters. I mean, we try to work with everyone, but I know that you are the trusted source, and that to me is really important. So I look forward to learning more about how you reach out to your communities and how you work with them to get the information to them.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Kayla. Thank you, Laura. We're going to move right on into our next section. So at this point, each of you submitted questions in your registration form, and we would like to bring those questions into our discussion today. This is an open forum discussion, so of course, feel free. But before we go there, we actually want to jump into our polling. So at this point, we're going to ask you to turn on your cameras, unmute. For the next part, you'll use the raise hand feature, but we're going to actually launch our poll right now. So for our first poll, our question is, how many of us work with organizations that are currently funding or working in advocacy, policy, systems change, or all of the above? So let's make sure our poll is launched, because we'd like for everyone to participate. Okay. Here, I see. Wow. So far we have 100% answered, and it looks like 45% of you So let's go ahead and share results. 45%. So 45% are involved in all the above, systems change, policy, and advocacy work. And then we have 27% involved in systems change work, 14% in policy, and another 14% in advocacy. Fantastic. And that actually moves us right to our next question, because we were curious which, are funders or, and organizations working across the board in this, or are they focused in certain areas? So we'd like to open up for discussion now. Does someone want to share what for those, actually, let's first go to the all of the above, folks. If there's a funder or organization that wants to share what they are doing in all of the above, advocacy, policy, and systems change work, and digital access, we'd love to hear from you. So let's take a moment to go back to our gallery view, so this way we can see everyone and engage in discussion around our poll question. Yes, Toby, I would love to hear your perspective.
Thank you. And I don't want to be remiss, Michael, best of luck on the next chapter. So I answered all of the above, but I come from a policy background. You didn't specify around digital access. So our foundation has funded advocacy and systems change in all different pieces of our programmatic work. Our mission is to improve the lives of residents of Greater Washington, so we fund all different things. We have our executive director and I have been talking about broadband access for about a half a dozen years. We've tried to enlist other funders in the conversation, our local council of governments, you name it, and we generally hear crickets chirping. We've got grantees that have focused on distributing technology, refurbishing computers, IT instruction, nothing around systems change and advocacy. So we have focused on the hardware and software and not the, sort of laying the fiber and wire or the advocacy or systems change. I've been here 21 years. We've never even gotten a proposal in that space, and we get about 1,000 proposals every year. So I'm putting out a call to all the funders, to all the speakers. I've loved the webinar series. If anyone on this call knows any organization that is operating in this space, we fund in the Washington, D.C. metropolitan area. We fund local work. So advocates or lobbyists on the Hill does not count for us. Capitol Hill just happens to be here. But we would love to get engaged in the space. And as much as we are trying to, no one is coming to us. So I'd really love to just hear suggestions from any of the panelists, any of the speakers. We would love to be in the space, and we don't understand how we can sort of get into it. Thank you.
Yeah. Before, I'd like to know if any other participants on the call want to comment or share perspective on in response to Toby's what Toby shared. And if not, then we'll go to our panelists to chime in. Okay, yeah, so panelists, thoughts?
I could maybe start us off. For us, certainly technology, I think, is a new area at Archstone. And one thing we saw, this was a parallel program, is we have an annual call for capacity building grants. But through that open RFP process, we saw that one of the greatest needs, and we started this about 2 or 3 years ago, the capacity building program. So it was during the height of the pandemic and COVID. The top request really was for IT infrastructure, CRM, technology access. And as we get into the discussion, that's one of the examples of how we've partnered locally to provide evaluation of a tablet distribution program. So I don't know if others have, thoughts on that, but for us, that really helped us see the need in California, in our state, and the areas that people were working on.
Thank you, Laura.
I think for us, during the pandemic, a lot of attention was paid to school children and hotspots and access to equipment. And so it becomes almost an education campaign for the general public, because I've mentioned to a few people that we're launching this digital inclusion project, and I've had people say, I thought that was solved. Didn't kids get tablets and hotspots? And so a big part of it, I believe, is making the broader public see that it is about seniors, it is about people of working age who don't have transportation, who can't get a job because they don't have digital access, or they have a tablet and don't know how to use it, or all of those things that I'm sure probably you've talked a lot about in these previous series. But actually naming and educating on the need, I think, is our first big challenge.
Yeah.
Yeah, those are all really good. So this is a funny question, because for FCC, we're kind of in the space, but not in the space. And here's what I mean. We do have the Affordable Connectivity Program, which really helps consumers to address issues. We know that during the pandemic, that's really when it came to the surface, as an example, that a lot of students, they couldn't go to school physically in the building, but they also didn't have the broadband access at home, or very limited broadband access. I'm going to step out of my FCC role and kind of talk a little bit about some of the ways that we promoted, and it may not apply to anyone here, but as soon as we had information about the Affordable Connectivity Program and its predecessor, the Emergency Broadband Benefit Program, and we were limited because we couldn't go out. So we did a lot of virtual asks, but some of the things that we did anywhere and everywhere that we could have information posted. I mean, we went all the way from local food banks, and I'm here based in DC, so we went to local food banks, and then we expanded that via outreach via email. Anywhere that we could have and host a webinar just to provide information, we did that. We worked a lot with libraries, and libraries have been an amazing partner with us for sharing of information. In our case, it was ACP, but I will say, and as I said, I'm saying this as stepping out of my FCC role, librarians are so great about sharing information about a lot of things. And that has, for us, that has worked. Another thing that also worked a lot for us were PTAs. Now, PTAs, yes, are very like K through 12, but for us, PTAs worked a lot because PTAs were still where the parents could join in. We're still hosting their meetings monthly. They were doing these online, and that was a perfect opportunity in my case to kind of say, hey, I want to present about this program. Now, again, I'm saying this as general, how we do it, but for us, the bottom line was anywhere that we could be, that is to provide information, because you never know who's reading that bulletin board or that flyer that may either use the information for themselves or can share it with a partner or a friend or a family member.
Yeah. Thank you, Kayla. Yeah, and thank you all for chiming in. I actually just received another question from a participant, and it was sent direct message, so I'd like to ask it here. This is for our panelists. A participant is wondering about, and actually it's for everyone here, not just anyone who wants to chime in who's immersed in this space. One of the participants is wondering about access in remote and rural areas. They work in rural districts across 4 states, including Arizona, California, Nevada, and New Mexico and Utah, and they've seen a homework gap, which has been a pretty big issue. And so in terms of digital access in remote and rural areas and how that ties into policy, how that ties into advocacy, how that ties into even just looking at the ecosystem and roles funders can play in reaching rural and remote areas. Are there any participants or from our panelists where your work touches the rural and remote space in terms of digital access, or perhaps in other parts of your work, and where there's potential tie-in to even future aspirations around digital access? Does anyone want to speak to that?
I can start. So FCC, this is an issue that we look at a lot because we believe everyone across the United States, whether you live in a rural area or not, should definitely have access. So I'm going to step a little bit away from kind of ACP to also mention that if you haven't already seen it, the FCC has some broadband maps that may be of interest. I can't really speak to the specifics on the map because I am not on that team, but we do have that information. Some of you may recall that these maps have been around for a while. One of our partners on this was the National Telecommunications and Information Administration, NTIA. FCC now, if you go to our website and you look for these broadband maps, on a very basic, and remember I said I'm not part of that team, but on a very basic level, you can find where internet is and where it isn't. And that from what I've heard from people that have used the map, they say that it's really helpful. There's also fabric challenges, and you can look on our website for information on deadlines. I'm not sure if it's still open, but even if it isn't, this is something that I really highly recommend looking at. We've also, back to ACP, we have also, when we have the budget for, we do what we call rural tours. So we do travel throughout the country. Our last one was in North Carolina. And what we did is we went and looked at for places that needed the information. And again, a very small budget for this, but we were budgeted to go in person and actually provide information mostly on ACP, but also on other things like emergency communications, which affects a lot of areas where there's flooding and there could be tornadoes and such. So those are some of the things that we do. And finally, I want to end with, we also work with a lot of organizations that reach out to rural communities. So if that's something that you can look into, I would highly recommend that. And USDA has also been a great partner for us because a lot of their programs focus in these areas. So that's kind of the information that we have helped provide.
Thank you, Kayla. Also, I know that we just dropped into the chat, thank you, Kelly, the map that Kayla just referenced. So for anyone that's interested in just diving into that link, you can find more information on your area, and that'll be a great resource. Hopefully that'll be a great resource to you. I imagine it would be. Any other thoughts, comments on reaching remote and rural areas? Are you working in your communities in remote or rural areas right now? What have been the challenges? What have been the opportunities?
Michael, I would say, I live in the most densely populated county in Florida. So rural isn't necessarily it, but we have, just like we have food deserts, we have connectivity deserts. And especially in the area we work in, there are areas that have a large population of migrant workers. And during the pandemic, particularly, that was something that we saw because of politics and other things. Their disconnectedness was exacerbated. And when there was some effort made to get hotspots and those kinds of things for students, what we heard was parents are now connected in a way they never were before, because if you aren't connected, you have no idea about your child's report cards and progress and all of those kinds of things, because school is a digital world. And when you add in language barriers and all of those kinds of things. So I think it's an area of concern, even for those of us who are in very urban areas.
And I'll piggyback on what Wilma just shared. Similarly, here in California, although we have large urban centers, of course, we also have remote and rural areas. And I wanted to add on to what Kayla shared about libraries and PTAs, these sources of partnership. We've also partnered really with our AAA system here in California, and they have been distributing tablets. Those are the area agencies on aging, and for reaching older adults, been able to use their networks. And I think we're still, really at the beginning stages though, and more is needed.
Yeah. Thank you, Laura, and thank you, Wilma, for adding more to this pretty important conversation. It's not always, remote. There are challenges, and then also the, as Wilma said, at the deserts of where there's been inaccessibility, and or other challenges that have left people disconnected. And so thinking through that and all the, these three essentials that come into play in, how to approach those challenges and get those populations connected. And with that, we're going to move right into, we're going to continue our discussion right now, but we're going to move into the questions that many of you shared in your registration. And so if you are able to turn your video cameras on, and if you're able to unmute, so long as you're not at a theme park or at a baseball game right now with a lot of sound behind you, we ask you to do so, because we'd really love for there to be active participation in this next part of the discussion. We're very excited about this. So please just take a moment to turn your cameras on if you are able, and then unmute as needed, because this will be about chiming in and being part of the workshop. This is about this is the workshop part. So we want to work through these challenges and questions together and think about them as as a community of funders across the country. So with that said, let's dive in. And also, if you have any nude questions, please use the raise hand feature or type them in the chat, and we'll bring them up in discussion as we move along. Great. So for our first question, can each of you elaborate more on the most effective strategies you have seen in advocacy, policy, and/or systems change as it relates to digital access? And what emerging strategies do you think are most promising? We're going to also let other funders on the call share their thoughts on this before we ask our panelists to chime in, because we'd like to hear from our community on where you're immersed in this space. Let's go to our panelists and let's hear their thoughts on this. And then we can invite our participants to chime in. Great.
Well, I can kick us off if you'd like. Yeah, so I think we've already touched upon this, but at Archstone Foundation, we really do believe that partnership is key. And for us, in thinking about the 3T strategies around teams, training, and technology, we knew technology was a new area for us. And so we actually worked with Manat Health Strategies to conduct like a landscape review and a gaps and analysis report, and also provide, just as you were saying, Michael, where are those opportunities for us to make a difference in the field? And that was really helpful, I think, for us to understand the needs of older adults in relation to digital access and information sharing across, for us, across health and social services. And within that report, one of their key findings for the 3 domains where we could make a difference and think about how to structure our funding. So this is now forward facing, you know, looking to the future of what we'll put together within our technology portfolio. Their #1 recommendation was around collaboration and partnerships. And they identified opportunities to partner with other funders, philanthropies, research institutions, in order to support additional research and projects. And then they also identified for us, and we've talked about this as well, how we can partner with government agencies. And so here in the state of California, our California Department of Aging, Department of Health Services, and then some of these federal programs as well that are coming through to provide access to devices. The second area or domain that they recommended, you know, we think about for our technology funding is around research and evaluation. So that's where providing or shining a light on these issues, maybe working with researchers to draft a white paper. And I think that speaks to the advocacy issues as well, if you understand the needs. And that goes hand in hand with getting good demographic information, as well as approaches to engage older adults and caregivers and the workforce in solutions to providing digital access. And then the third area they recommended was around pilot programs. And I think that's where, you know, as funders, we can have that niche or good opportunity to take a little bit of a risk, you know, try something out at a smaller scale and see how it works in terms of education and training, and then think about maybe bringing that to a larger population or scaling up. And I will drop in the chat right now a link to that report if you're interested in learning more.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Laura.
And Michael, I may be skipping ahead to another question, but I can
Go for it.
I can follow up here.
We're
I think
flowing.
sharing how we got, as the Community Foundation got into this space, it comes on this and other initiatives, it comes back to us to cross-sector collaboration and network. And the way we got essentially to be the backbone organization of digital inclusion was there was a grassroots organization of just people who cared about this in St. Petersburg, in a specific part of St. Petersburg that's a historically underserved community. And they had started working together right before the pandemic, shifted during the pandemic to providing devices and some of those sorts of things that we all did just to get by, and doing some device drives and all of that. But there came to be a realization in that group that all the people who were involved had other jobs, had other responsibilities, that there needed to be some structure around it. And so that's when they approached us at the Community Foundation to bring it under our umbrella, but not as the leader, as a leader. And we talk about that all the time. And so in this collaborative, this network around digital inclusion, we have work groups that are looking at what the baseline data is and how we measure whether we're being successful. How do we do the device drives? How do we set up the training, the support? All of those things that we all know need to happen, still concentrating primarily on this one area with the idea that if we get it right here and we can show progress, we can then scale this to other underserved neighborhoods in our county, in our adjoining counties, the other places we serve. And so, but it really is bringing together, there's somebody from the cable company, there's somebody from the transit system to talk about how we can use buses. And one of the chief people in our group is the head librarian for the city of St. Petersburg, back to Kayla's point. So getting all the right voices around the table and organizing them in the right direction.
Yeah. Thank you, Wilma.
I just wanted quickly to add, for the FCC, we are regulators in the telecom space, so this might seem a little strange, but for us, really, and I go back to ACP, a lot of what works is when consumers understand what the eligibility requirements are for the Affordable Connectivity Program. There are a lot of them, and I'm only going to name a few here, but you can always go to fcc.gov/ACP for more, for the full list. So when consumers understand that they only have to meet one requirement, it just brings up a lot more understanding, not only from the consumer who is eligible to enroll, but also from the person that's helping the consumer enroll. So there are things like that consumers kind of ask us about. Yes, most and many of the applicants use their income, and there's a whole guidelines, the federal poverty guidelines are used. The paper application has a full list of them, but there are other ways that when consumers understand that it just doesn't have to be based on income. It could be a Medicaid recipient. It could be someone who has a child that receives the free or reduced school lunch or school breakfast. It could be someone who's a veteran receiving their pensions. So all these things work when the information is shared so that consumers really understand that it's not just a one eligibility requirement, but that there are several that can qualify them for this program.
Yeah. Thank you, Kayla. Thank you all for coming. We're actually going to move on to our next question, which came from another registrant. Beyond connectivity and access to devices, what are additional barriers and challenges related to older adults not having digital literacy exposure? Who would like to take that on first? Okay. If no other participants want to, we're going to go to our panelists for this next question.
Oh, I see Diane Oliver's hand raised, and then I'm happy.
Oh,
yeah,
yes. Diane.
Thank you.
Laura, and
Thank
Diane,
you,
I'm so
Laura.
sorry. Yes.
Laura and I work in the same space. We're both focused on older adults. My foundation is in Middle Tennessee. We're located in Nashville. And we are just kind of nearing the conclusion of a one-year statewide grant program that we've been managing around digital literacy and access for older Tennesseans. And thank you for all the positive words about librarians. Libraries have been some of our best partners, and my husband recently retired from a 50-year career in public libraries. So I'm always happy to report the librarians are out there doing, everyone thinks they're doing great work. But we've seen, you know, there are a lot of different barriers. I think one of the biggest ones we've seen is just, I guess, lack of comfort. You know, there's just this fear from older adults who've never been digitally, electronically active. And you've got to kind of dispel some of that. And I think lack of understanding of the value that connectivity can bring to you. And it's, you know, social engagement, access to healthcare, access to essential services. And once they see that, it's just, wow. I mean, I think it's almost a transformational experience. So a lot of the work we've done early on with the 30 partners working across the state is, help them with, how they promote these programs. And it's not just come learn how to use a computer. It's, learn what this can do for you as an individual and the access that it gives you. But I guess to just not to go on too long, but to answer a previous question, one of the things we've done with this initiative is we're trying to get uniform data from all 30 organizations so that we have a statewide story to tell. And so we had a meeting with our partners just this morning, and we've decided to come together in September and really talk about how we can maybe collectively try to move this story forward. And we're looking at, creating a policy brief that really shows the implications of what we've learned and how it can inform future funding, both public and private, and how maybe we can take some of this work to scale across the state in urban and rural as our, government is really trying to increase broadband access. So anyway, we're just really excited right now about everything we're learning here in Tennessee, and I will be happy to share that with you, Michael, as this evolves, and so the Patterson Foundation can kind of distribute that out to all the interested folks.
Yeah, thank you, Diane, and absolutely, right? I mean, this is about the sharing of knowledge so that we can learn how others are doing this. So please, by all means, thank you so much. And thank you for your comments and sharing more about your work in this space. We appreciate that. To our panelists, excuse me, let me make sure any other participants that want to chime in on what Diane just shared. Just want to make sure everyone has a chance. Yes, Ken.
Yeah, I'm interested in sharing. It just is only tangentially related, but it's related to each of the topics we've discussed, if that's okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I mean, you asked about engagement, and you asked about systems change and, advocacy. And we just had an event at the New Britain Housing Authority in Connecticut that gets to the core of what you're saying. And we got to this place over the couple of years by rejecting one of the premises that we have been talking about here. We decided to not bridge silos because legacy systems aren't meant to necessarily be bridged without the expense of MOUs and open API and things like that. And we just rethought the whole process and decided, instead of bridging silos, why don't we create some sheet music so agencies can sing like a choir? Because all of the agencies are working together with the same clientele, whether it be housing or disability services or opportunity youth. So how do we re-envision that? Well, we created a social health passport using college coders. It entails 4 things. We take vital signs, which is, when we go to the doctor, we know what those are, but for the purposes of self-sufficiency, it's income, credit score, emergency savings. We did qualitative measures, because what good is it if you get a job and make more money if you're miserable? We assess and mitigate for barriers, but we also built in what we call an ASAP button, because if you're in public housing, for instance, and you run out of food on the 27th, you may dip into your rent money. And if you lose your child care, you may not be able to make your rent because you have to take time off from work. So we want to partner with some local social workers to pair people with assets locally, but using mobile technology. The premise of this, though, is that we've gamified social mobility by building a process by which, people engage in the social drivers of health. The more they engage with the system, the more points they earn. And then we do a contingency management model to make sure that they get rewarded. And then we have public warm handoff events where we bring in toilet paper, paper towels, and stuff that SNAP doesn't cover, so they can be incentivized to show up in the first place. The long and the short of it is, I think how we did advocacy was we treated it like stand-up comedy. When, if you've ever gone to an open mic night, you don't get stage time unless you bring people. Well, we asked 15 agencies to bring 4 people. So they could be fed by quantitative measures, and all of these agencies could get a warm handoff and real-time appointments, so that momentum isn't lost between the time they go to an event and they go home and have to make a phone call. So anyways, we've started a company to do this, and I'm going to put my name in the chat. And if anyone would like to talk about participating in a pilot, or hear more, or offer insight into how we are bringing mobile technology to social mobility, that'd be great. We'd love to hear from you. Just close with this. If you go into your app store and search for social mobility, you get Amazon, you get Family Feud, the game, some dating sites, and then it starts to get weird. There's no social mobility app out there, because it's who you know, not what you know, unless it's low income or people who are suffering from the disease of poverty, and then it's here's 250 transactions, good luck. So thank you for listening, and I appreciate everyone's insights.
Thank you, Ken. I want to just make sure we have time for one final question here before we move into we might have time for share out and some Q&A, but let's scoot over to our last question. Funders can be reluctant to touch advocacy and policy work. And so this question is for Wilma. Wilma, can you elaborate more on how the foundation brought in Boulder advocacy, and how you invest in digital access advocacy or policy work while remaining within the foundation's legal limits to do so?
Well, thank you. As I mentioned earlier, in my early days in this work, it was, we don't advocate, we are neutral. And one of the things that we have done over the past couple of years is to educate internally about what advocacy means, because we can't really do it if we don't know what it is. And a key in that was bringing in the folks from Boulder Advocacy. I believe they're based in Austin. We did this virtually, but they have a philanthropic advocacy playbook that they provide free, that talks about very clearly what is advocacy, why you should do it, how you should do it. And some of it is just some very simple things, like we changed our status with the IRS from one set of numbers that I don't recall to 501H, that has nothing to do with being our 501c3 status, but it means we don't really have to keep track of how much money we spend on advocacy. And had a really good discussion both with our staff and with our board about the fact that obviously we don't do partisan political things. That's a huge no. That lobbying is not a huge no, as a lot of us thought. There are some parameters to do it, but the space that we're all comfortable with and that's got the green light is really, and I've got it up on my screen, it's public education. It's influencing corporations to do the right thing. It can be litigation, but most of it is just things like research, training, getting to know your legislators, just knowing what's going on, so that if there is some big thing in the legislature that's going to have a bad effect on digital inclusion deserts or those kinds of things, you can pick up the phone and say, hey, you might want to read this report before you vote on that. And that doesn't sound like rocket science, but it was a huge aha moment for us. And I think maybe for others who just are kind of in that, oh, we don't know. And honestly, for us, we just did our strategic plan. last year. It included things like building connectedness and trust in the community. And that includes being advocates. It includes, in one of our values we adopted was courage. And so I think in general, it's more of a, let's talk about our culture. Let's talk about what's really important. And the rest of it can then fall into place. And I do recommend the folks at Boulder Advocacy are good partners to help walk you through some of those conversations.
Thank you so much, Wilma. At this point, we're actually going to drop our after action survey in our chat. We're going to ask each of you to take 60 seconds before we go. So instead of sharing this after action survey with you in a follow-up email that might get lost somewhere, we're going to drop it in the chat right now because we'd like to hear what you thought of this workshop and the workshop series at large. So please share your feedback and click that link. And while you're filling that out, we're going to take one more question from anybody here who may want to ask our panelists something, maybe a burning question they have about their work. And if you don't have another question, there's someone that couldn't be here that also shared a question that I have. So I can ask our panelists in case we don't hear from someone, but I wanted to give our funders and participants a chance to ask before we go. Okay, so our final question for our panelists is, what would be one of the biggest lessons learned from your work in this space?
I think actually Diane touched on it earlier. I mean, collaboration, and partnership. But we found in the first project we took on in this space around college attainment, one of the big keys is getting everyone to agree on the data, getting all of the partners to say, this is what we are measuring, this is how we are measuring it. And that may, again, sound simple, but when you have two community colleges, two of the largest school districts in the country, and a large research university all trying to agree on what the graduation rate is and what the dropout rate is and those kinds of things, it took probably 2 years to reach that agreement on these are the basic data points and how we're going to measure and how we're going to talk about it going forward. And our community impact team, our collective impact team, likes to talk about collaboration and change move at the speed of trust. And I think one of the ways to move at the speed of trust is to work together on those key data points. And then you have a common North Star to throw in all those trite phrases.
Thank you, Wilma. On our last question from our other panelists, what would be one of the biggest lessons learned from your work in this space?
Well, I really agree about collaboration and would say for us, and this echoes back to the last question, what's needed in terms of bringing access to older adults, right? It's not just connectivity and it's not just a device, but it's the training too. And that does take collaboration with those trusted agencies in language, culturally appropriate, and someone, to sit there with the older adult to get online and overcome, I think, just as Diane was describing, that lack of understanding about how it really could help improve their lives. And so I think that's so important. The second is the measurement. And I love that Wilma described about agreeing about the set of measures. That's the only way to know if you're making progress, of course, is to measure it as you go. And on the point of collaboration, I think I'll leave you with just inviting any funders who are interested. Grantmakers in Aging has a funders collaborative for people who are interested in this issue of technology. And we meet every 4 to 6 weeks or so and have similar discussions to these to say, you know, what are you working on? What's working? What are you seeing? And how can we share what we're doing? So would invite anyone to join us over with Grantmakers in Aging as well.
Thank you, Laura. Kayla, any concluding thoughts on this question?
Well, I agree with my fellow panelists. I think for me, and it sounds simple, but it doesn't always turn out to be. So FCC, we, especially my team, we're with Consumer Affairs and Outreach Division. What we look at, we are not afraid to ask people to partner with us. The worst that can happen is someone says no, but most of the time when we ask, people are really willing to partner, and partnering with us is very simple. It's just a way that we can share information with you to share with your community, because you are the people that the community knows, that the community trusts. And I could go in somewhere, but people will look at me as, oh, she's with the federal government. But if they're getting information about how important the Affordable Connectivity Program is from you, the community is just more open to learning about the program. So I think that would be for me.
Thank you, Kayla. So thank you to our panelists for incredible insight and perspectives on this workshop theme in terms of advocacy, policy, systems change. We're going to take a moment. Please stay with us for a quick moment. This is our final workshop, and so we're going to take a group photo. So Kelly, if you could please cue up our group photo, and we'll do that now.
Thank you, Michael. Yeah, I'll give everyone just a couple of seconds here to come on screen. I'm actually going to need to take 2 screenshots because our participants are on 2 of our screens. So for my first one, we'll do a 3, 2, 1 countdown. So 3, 2, 1. And let me swipe over, hold it, 3, 2, 1. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Kelly. And let's actually jump into, because we're going to pull up our slide deck here. So we have some exciting news, and this is the debut. We are finalizing, because we need to complete this workshop in order to finalize it, the debut of Pathways Forward, Learnings and Takeaways in Digital Access, which is a report that summarizes the learnings and takeaways of this entire workshop series. So I cannot say that I could magically make that appear in a report right at the end of this, but I will do my best to summarize our learnings from today. And we hope to get this report to you in the coming weeks. So we're looking forward to sharing this widely. And we thank each of you for all of your meaningful contributions during this workshop series, because you will see them reflected in the report. You will, if you'd like to receive the report, we're going to drop a link in our chat box right now. Just ensure when you click that link and you sign up, click the Digital Access for All checkbox and then submit, because that'll ensure that you receive the link to our takeaways report. And with that, I'm going to turn it back over to my colleague and dear friend, Sherry Courier. Sherry, take it away.
Thank you. Don't go away yet while you're all completing that link for this special report. We want to say a big thank you to those that made all of the workshop series happen, especially to the Campaign for Grade Level Reading for the Funder to Funder series as our co-host. And then I just want to give you a quick recap of what has happened since October 4th last year when Hurricane Ian hit Florida. Michael and I were in different places in the world, And our presenters, we were all able to come together and have the first workshop. Since that, there have been 8, almost once a month. There have been 25 organizations represented in these workshop series from across the country and also the globe. 25 individual presenters, so someone representing each one of those differently. 16 funder partnerships have been showcased throughout the workshop series, which is phenomenal. And now we know, as we started to get into the latter workshops, there are many more. I cannot go away from the workshop series 8 without thanking the Digital Access for All initiative team, Maribel, Kelly, Karen, Kiara, and Michael, of course, in their lead facilitation role. And as Michael mentioned, he is launching as a fellow later today, basically, to the Farish Foundation. But once a partner with TPF, always a partner with TPF. So we look forward to continuing work, and especially just to the Patterson Foundation, our president and CEO, Deborah Jacobs, who gives us the latitude to bring to you across the country all of these wonderful, wonderful series of connections and connective tissue. And I heard Wilma talk about, trust. Change happens at the speed of trust. And I think this is proven through the workshops. So thank you all. Thank you so much. Continue to follow us on our social media, and we will be following you. And we also will be sending out a follow-up email with a lot of the materials in it and our contacts. So remember, Michael's moving out, so you can contact me. My email is going to be in that follow-up, or any of us here on the team at the Patterson Foundation. So with that, we wish you a fond farewell, and thank you so very much for always sticking with us, many of you throughout the entire series. And to our presenters today, thank you.
Thank you, Pat. And thank you to Grantmakers in Aging for partnering with us and sharing this widely. We're appreciative for their, to their support and for being a great partner in this as well. Thank you.
Everyone have a great rest of your week. Appreciate your